Watch my kids while I travel, my daughter-in-law demanded, tossing her designer bag onto my dining table. She assumes that at 62, I exist solely to be her free nanny. She forgets that the house she sleeps in and the company her husband works for are controlled by my signature. I smiled and agreed to her plan. However, when the security scanner beeped for my ticket, she finally realized who was truly going on vacation. My name is Margaret Ellison. I am 62 years old, a widow, and until 2 years ago, I was the CEO of Northbridge Logistics, a company I built from the ground up in the grittier industrial parks of Silverford. I spent decades negotiating with union leaders, navigating supply chain crises, and managing fleets of trucks that crossed state lines in the dead of winter. Yet, as I sat at the head of my mahogany dining table this past Sunday evening, I realized that to the people eating my roast beef, I was nothing more than a convenient piece of furniture. The silence in the room was only broken by the chaotic shrieks of my grandchildren. Liam, who is 7, and Grace, who is 5, were currently treating my living room sofa like a trampoline. Their mother, my daughter-in-law Olivia, did not seem to notice. She had breezed into my home an hour earlier, dropped her $3,000 designer handbag right next to the gravy boat, and immediately glued her eyes to her phone screen. I stood up to clear the plates, my joints protesting slightly from the damp November chill. Olivia didn't offer to help. She was too busy scrolling. As I walked into the kitchen with a stack of porcelain, her voice carried clearly from the dining room. She had finally decided to make a call, though not to check on her children. "Yes, absolutely," Olivia was saying, her tone bright and dismissive. "We are doing Europe for at least 3 weeks. No, don't worry about the kids. We'll just dump them on my mother-in-law. She is retired now, so it's not like she has anything important to do." I froze, gripping the edge of the granite counter. The porcelain plates rattled slightly in my hands. Nothing important to do. I took a deep breath, composed my face into a mask of polite neutrality, and returned to the dining room. I sat back down. Olivia finally looked up from her screen, pushing a lock of perfectly highlighted hair behind her ear. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mom," she started, her voice devoid of a question mark. "Next month, Ethan and I are going to Europe to survey some potential real estate investments. You will need to come over to our house and watch the kids for the full 3 weeks. It wasn't a request. It was a directive." I looked at my son, Ethan. He was staring intently at his mashed potatoes, refusing to meet my eyes. "You mean," I asked, keeping my voice dangerously level, "that I am expected to move out of my own home, move into yours, and manage the entire household and 2 young children while you two go on a trip?" Olivia frowned, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "It is not that you have to, Mom. It is that you should. It is what grandmothers do. It is your job." I looked at Ethan again. He shifted in his seat, looking like a chastised schoolboy rather than a 30-year-old man. "Mom," Ethan started, his voice weak. "You aren't really busy anyway, and Olivia really needs a break. Just help us this one time." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the boy I had raised while working 16-hour days, the boy whose tuition I had paid for by mortgaging my own future, the boy who now couldn't even look me in the eye because he was terrified of his wife. To them, my legacy, my career, and my dignity meant nothing. I was just free labor. Olivia took my silence for submission. She tapped her screen a few times, her long nails clicking against the glass. Great. I am booking the flights right now, she announced, satisfied. She held up the phone to show me the confirmation screen, a smug smile playing on her lips. So, that is settled then. Watch my kids while I travel. And don't make me worry by changing your mind later. I looked at the flight confirmation glowing on her screen. I looked at her triumphant smile. A cold, sharp clarity settled over me, replacing the anger. I would not dream of it, I said softly. You will be the one worrying. Olivia, I thought as I picked up my wine glass. Not me. Olivia sees an old woman with too much free time. She does not see the girl who grew up in a dying steel town in the Midwest, the daughter of a man who smelled like diesel, and a woman whose feet were permanently swollen from standing at a supermarket register. I spent the first 20 years of my life dreaming of a world that did not smell like rust and desperation. When my first husband, Jack Ellison, and I moved to Silverford in the late 80s, we had nothing but a used sedan and a box of dishes. I took a job as a dispatcher for a local trucking outfit, working the graveyard shift while studying supply chain management by the light of a desk lamp. The crisis came 4 years later. The company I worked for was imploding due to mismanagement. Instead of looking for another dead-end job, I did something reckless. I took the deed to our small, leaky bungalow and walked into the bank. I mortgaged the roof over our heads to found Northbridge Logistics. It was terrifying, but I knew the industry was shifting toward technology, and I wanted to be on the crest of that wave, not drowning beneath it. Ethan was only 5 years old back then. While other children spent their weekends at the playground or watching cartoons, my son grew up in a drafty warehouse that smelled of cardboard and exhaust. I can still see him sitting on a wooden pallet, driving his die-cast trucks over imaginary highways, while I argued with drivers over the radio and tallied invoices. He would look up at me with wide eyes, watching his mother command a fleet of 18-wheelers. Those first few years were a blur of exhaustion. I worked 16 hours a day, sleeping on a cot in the back office when the weather was too bad to drive home. Jack did not have the stomach for the pressure. As Northbridge began to grow, his pride began to shrink. He started drinking, resenting the fact that his wife was the one signing the paychecks. I remember the night he left, the smell of whiskey stale on his breath as he packed his bag. You think you don't need anyone. Margaret. He had slurred, his voice thick with bitterness and pity. You and your damn company. You don't need a husband. You just need another employee to boss around. He left me with a broken heart and a pile of debts he had run up in secret. I did not crumble. I sat down with the bank officers, men in grey suits who looked at me like I was a bad investment, and I negotiated terms that would make a lesser person vomit from stress. I kept the company. Over the next 2 decades, Northbridge expanded from a local courier service into a federal transport network. We were one of the first to implement proprietary tracking software, developed by a team I hired myself. I sacrificed my youth, my sleep, and my personal life for 2 things: that company and my son. I remember standing in the stadium bleachers when Ethan graduated with his degree in finance. I clapped until my hands stung, tears blurring my vision. I looked at him in his gown and thought that everything, every skipped meal, every lonely night in the warehouse had been worth it. I believed I was raising a successor, a partner who would understand the value of what I had built. Northbridge Logistics was acquired by a major conglomerate 3 years ago for tens of millions of dollars. I may have retired from the CEO chair, but I did not retire my brain. I still hold a significant block of shares. I control the Ellison Family Trust, and Perhaps most importantly, the deed to the beautiful colonial house where Ethan and Olivia currently live is sitting in my safe, bearing my name. They seem to have forgotten that the roof they sleep under, the lifestyle they flaunt, and the security they take for granted are all held together by the very person they now treat as an unpaid servant. They see a grandmother. They are about to be reminded that they are dealing with a CEO. Olivia is 33 years old, though she spends a small fortune on serums and treatments to look 25. She describes herself as a lifestyle influencer on social media, a job that seems to involve taking photos of avocado toast and writing long captions about manifesting abundance and honoring her truth. She comes from money, old money that taught her how to order staff around, but not how to say thank you. To Olivia, the world is a service industry, and she is the perpetual VIP customer. She constantly uses words like deserve and pamper, as if life is one long spa appointment that she is entitled to by birthright. Ethan met her at a luxury real estate conference 3 years ago. He was there to learn about property investment. She was there, I suspect, to invest in a husband. He was dazzled by her confidence and her perfectly curated appearance. I tried to be happy for him. I tried to silence the little voice in my head, the gut instinct honed by decades of vetting shady suppliers that whispered she was looking for a financier, not a partner. They married quickly, too quickly. From the moment Liam and Grace were born, Olivia made it clear that parenting was a group project where she did the least amount of work. She hired night nurses. She sent them to expensive day camps the moment they could walk. She needed frequent detox weekends and spiritual retreats to recover from the exhaustion of having nannies raise her children. I love my grandchildren. I truly do. In the beginning, I was happy to take them on weekends. I would read them stories, take them to the park to feed the ducks, and let them bake messy cookies in my kitchen. But I did this as a grandmother who wanted to bond with her family, not as an employee. I had boundaries. Or at least, I thought I did. Slowly, the requests became demands. The politeness evaporated. Olivia began to assume that my time was infinite and entirely at her disposal. She would book hair appointments or nail sessions and then text me 10 minutes before she had to leave. "Mom, come over," she would text. "The kids are napping and I need to get my roots done. It is an emergency." At first, I went. Then I started to push back. I looked to Ethan for support, but my son had become an expert in avoidance. "Mum, please," he would say, rubbing the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. "It is just easier if you go. Olivia is really stressed. Just keep the peace for me." Okay. So I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. Until the day of my cardiologist appointment, I had been feeling palpitations, a fluttering in my chest that scared me. I had waited 2 months for this appointment. That morning, Olivia called. She wanted to go to a brunch with her mommy group because she needed to reconnect with her feminine energy. "I cannot come." "Olivia," I told her firmly over the phone, "I have an appointment with my heart specialist at 2:00. I cannot miss it." There was a silence on the line, followed by a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Seriously, Mum," Olivia snapped. "You are going to choose a checkup over helping your family. You are being incredibly selfish. God. It is not like you are dying. Or maybe you are just lying to me. Are you rushing off to meet some boyfriend at your age? Is that it?" I was so stunned by her cruelty that I hung up. My hand shook as I held the phone. The disrespect accumulated like sediment in a pipe, slowly choking off my affection. The final blow came a month ago. I was in their kitchen, organizing the pantry because Olivia had complained it was too chaotic. She was in the living room with two of her friends, drinking white wine. They did not know I could hear them. It is so annoying when she says no. One friend said, "Tell me about it." Olivia replied, her voice loud and arrogant. But honestly, if she does not want to watch the kids, she can just move to another state. Go live in a retirement home in Florida or something. We can manage without her. We only keep her around because she is useful. I stood there, holding a jar of organic pasta sauce, and felt something inside me harden. It was the same feeling I had 30 years ago when the bank threatened to foreclose on my first warehouse. It was the moment I stopped being a victim and started being a strategist. From that day on, I continued to smile, I continued to visit, but internally, I took a step back. I went home and opened my heavy steel safe. I began to review the deeds, the trust fund documents, and the insurance policies. I realized I had to make a choice between my natural love for my son and my own self-respect. Olivia thought I was a rug she could walk on. She did not know that I was actually the floorboards holding them up, and I was preparing to pull myself out from under their feet. The private dining room of the Gilded Oak in downtown Silverford was packed with laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. It was my sister's 70th birthday, a milestone that should have been the focus of the evening. Instead, the center of gravity had shifted entirely to the end of the table where Olivia sat. She was impossible to miss in a sequined crimson dress that was far too loud for a family dinner. Every 5 minutes, she paused the conversation to take a selfie or record a video for her followers, sighing dramatically in between shots about the unbearable stress of motherhood. I sat quietly next to my sister, sipping my iced tea, watching the performance. "So, Ethan and I have finally decided to treat ourselves," Olivia announced, her voice pitching up to ensure the entire table could hear. "We are doing a 3-week Euro trip next month. Rome, Paris, then down to Santorini. It is not just a vacation, obviously. We are scouting properties for potential Airbnb investments. You have to spend money to make money, right?" The table murmured with polite admiration. My cousin Susan leaned forward, swirling her wine. "That sounds amazing. Olivia, but 3 weeks is a long time. What about Liam and Grace?" Olivia laughed, a tinkling, practiced sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. She waved a manicured hand in my direction without even looking at me. "Oh, Grandma is watching them, obviously. She is retired now. It is not like she has anything to do except watch TV all day." "Right." A ripple of laughter went around the table. It was reflexive, the kind of polite chuckle people give when they are not sure if a joke is actually funny. But a few of the older relatives stopped eating. My sister frowned, glancing at me with concern. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from a sudden, sharp rage. I looked at Ethan. I waited for him to correct her. I waited for him to say that his mother ran a logistics empire for 20 years, or that she had a life of her own. Ethan just gave a weak, apologetic smile and shrugged. "Mom?" "Well, Mom always says she loves being with the grandkids." "Margaret." "Are you sure?" my cousin Susan asked, looking directly at me. 3 weeks with 2 energetic kids? That is a lot of work for one person." Before I could open my mouth, Olivia cut in again. Oh, please. It is not hard work. Our house is huge. We have a pool, and the kids basically entertain themselves on their iPads. It is practically a vacation for her, too. I set my glass down on the tablecloth. The sound was soft, but the silence that followed it was heavy. Interesting, I said, my voice low but steady enough to cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. It seems someone has scheduled my life for me without bothering to ask if I agreed. The atmosphere in the room instantly curdled. The smiles faltered. Guests looked down at their plates or pretended to be very interested in the floral centerpieces. Olivia's smile froze, then twisted into a look of annoyance. She leaned in toward Ethan, lowering her voice to a whisper that was intended to be private, but was loud enough for me and half the table to hear perfectly. "I told you," she hissed at him. "Your mother. She is getting so sensitive in her old age. We just have to make the decisions for her. She does not know what she wants." I sat there, frozen. The humiliation washed over me, cold and familiar. It was the exact same feeling I had 30 years ago when Jack told our friends that I was just playing business while he drank away our savings. Olivia did not see me as a person. She saw me as a senile resource to be managed. I did not cause a scene. I did not scream. I simply finished my meal, paid my share of the bill, and smiled at the guests as I left. But as I walked out of that restaurant, the decision had been made. The Euro trip would indeed be a turning point for this family, just not the one Olivia was expecting. That night, the house was silent. I went into my study and locked the door. The only light came from the brass lamp on my heavy oak desk. I walked over to the wall, safe hidden behind a painting of the Silverford skyline. My hands were steady as I spun the dial. Click. I pulled the heavy steel door open and took out a thick stack of documents. I spread them out across the desk surface. There was my last will and testament. There were the trust fund outlines. And there, on top of the pile, was the deed to the colonial house at 42 Maple Drive, the house where Olivia was currently sleeping, believing she was the queen of her castle. I looked at the papers, and for the first time in weeks, the anxiety in my chest vanished. It was replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. "You want to treat me like a child," I thought, running my finger over the property deed. "Fine. Then I will treat you like one." The next morning, I did not cry. I did not pace the floor. I made a pot of strong black coffee and picked up the phone. I called Denise Harper, the attorney who had stood by my side through the sale of Northbridge Logistics and the creation of our family trust. She is a woman made of steel and silk, and she knows where every financial skeleton in this town is buried. "Denise," I said when she answered. "I need an emergency meeting. 9 o'clock. Clear your schedule." 30 minutes later, I was sitting in her office, surrounded by the familiar scent of mahogany and old paper. Denise wasted no time. She laid out the files on her desk, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Let us review the current structure." "Margaret," Denise said, tapping a thick binder. "The house at 42 Maple Drive, where Ethan and Olivia reside, is titled solely in your name. The Ellison Family Trust holds the bulk of your liquid assets. You are the primary custodian for the college savings accounts of both Liam and Grace. You also retain a significant minority stake in the transport conglomerate." I nodded, my face impassive. "I want to make changes, significant ones." I instructed Denise to draft a codicil to my will. I ordered the immediate transfer of 70% of my liquid assets into a newly formed generation-skipping trust. This fund would be strictly designated for the education and medical needs of Liam and Grace. The key is control, I explained, leaning forward. Ethan and Olivia are to have zero access to the principal or the interest. The children will gain full control only when they turn 25. Until then, it is locked. And the remaining 30%, Denise asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. That is the leverage, I said. I want a conduct clause added. If my son or his wife attempt to coerce, harass, or exert undue pressure on me regarding my living arrangements or financial decisions, that remaining portion will be immediately liquidated and donated to the Red Cross. I want them to know that every time they scream at me, they are burning their own inheritance. Denise stopped writing. She took off her glasses and looked at me with genuine concern. Margaret, are you sure this is a nuclear option? Once we file this, it creates a wall between you and your son that might never come down. I thought about the dinner the night before. I thought about Olivia's smirk and the way the entire table had laughed at the useless old woman. My daughter-in-law gave me the answer last night, I replied softly. She thinks I am a senile old woman who needs to be managed. I am simply proving that I am still the CEO of this family. We moved on to the real estate. I told Denise to list my current residence in Silverford for sale immediately. I instructed her to put in an offer on a condo in Clearwater Shore, a quiet coastal town I had dreamed of retiring to for years. And the Maple Drive house, Denise asked, "Do you want to evict them?" "Not yet," I said. A cold smile touching my lips. "But check the occupancy agreement we signed 3 years ago." Denise flipped through the file and paused. Her eyebrows shot up. "It is a standard year-to-year lease," she murmured. "It renews automatically on the 1st of January unless one party gives 30 days of notice." "Exactly," I said. Olivia has never read a contract in her life. She assumes that house is hers. She forgets she is technically a tenant. I have the right to non-renew. Denise nodded slowly, a look of professional admiration crossing her face. Then, she tapped the calendar on her desk. "If you want to make this airtight, Margaret, you need an alibi. If you simply refuse to watch the kids, they will paint you as spiteful. You need a prior commitment that cannot be moved." She turned her computer screen toward me. "There is a luxury cruise circumnavigating the Caribbean. It departs 2 days before their flight to Europe and lasts for 4 weeks. Book it." I looked at the screen. 4 weeks of ocean air, silence, and no demands. "Book it," I said. For the next hour, I signed papers. My hand did not shake. The pen scratched against the paper with a rhythmic, decisive sound. It felt exactly like the old days when I was negotiating fleet contracts with union bosses. The adrenaline was the same. The calculation was the same. The only difference was that this time, the hostile counterparty was my own flesh and blood. "It is done," Denise said, closing the final folder. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. The heavy weight that had been sitting on my chest for years began to lift. I was not a victim anymore. I was the one holding the pen, precisely 1 week after the disastrous birthday dinner. My phone pinged with a notification. It was an email from Olivia. The subject line read, "Kids schedule final." There was no greeting, no inquiry about my health, just a cold, itemized list. It contained the entry codes to the smart locks, a tutorial on how to operate their complicated espresso machine, and a strict bedtime routine for Liam and Grace. The final line was bolded, Be here by Friday evening. We fly out early Saturday. I sat in my study, reading the screen over the rim of my glasses. She really thought she had won. She thought my silence at the restaurant was submission. I hit reply and typed a response that I had been drafting in my head for days. Thank you for sharing your plan, Olivia. However, as I mentioned at the dinner, I am unavailable. On that Friday evening, I will be at the airport checking in for a month-long cruise around the Caribbean. I will not be able to watch the children while you are away. You need to arrange immediate alternative care for Liam and Grace. I hit send. Less than 2 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate violently against the mahogany desk. Olivia. I answered on the third ring, my voice calm. Hello, Olivia? Are you insane? Olivia screamed. I had to pull the phone away from my ear. A cruise? Since when you are doing this on purpose, you are deliberately sabotaging our investment trip. I am doing no such thing, I replied, taking a sip of my tea. I am simply living my life. I told you repeatedly that I did not want to be a full-time nanny. I am 62 years old. Olivia, my time and my money belong to me, not to your itinerary. You are so selfish, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You only think about yourself. We have bookings, we have meetings. If you do not help us, do not blame us when we reconsider your position in the family. Do not think you will be seeing much of the grandkids. And as for the inheritance... Olivia, I cut in, my voice dropping an octave. The inheritance has already been reconsidered, but that is a conversation for another day. Right now, your focus should be on finding a safe, legal guardian for your children, because it will not be me. There was a sudden, stunned silence on the other end. She had not expected me to push back on the money. She hung up without another word. 10 minutes later, Ethan called. His approach was different. He sounded exhausted, his voice thick with panic. Mom, please, he begged. You have to understand. My company is at a turning point. This trip, it is not just a vacation. If I can secure these properties, it changes everything for us. I need this. And where exactly? I asked, staring at the photo of Liam and Grace on my desk. Do your children fit into this turning point? We can't take them, Mom. Ethan groaned. It is a business trip. They would be bored. It is too expensive. Then you reschedule, I said firmly. Or you take a shorter trip. Or you hire a professional nanny service. We can't. Ethan snapped, his frustration leaking through. Olivia booked everything as non-refundable to save money. If we cancel, we lose thousands of dollars. We are leveraged to the hilt on this. Mom, you have to help. I do not have to do anything. Ethan, I said, you are 30 years old. If you cannot afford the loss, you should not have booked the trip before securing childcare. That is Management 101. I ended the call. For the rest of the afternoon, my phone lit up incessantly. Texts from Olivia flooded in, oscillating between victimhood and venom. You never loved the kids. You are just jealous that I am young and traveling. You are trying to control Ethan. I hope you are happy destroying your son's future. I did not reply to a single one. Instead, I opened a new email draft. This one was addressed to a family law firm that specialized in child welfare. I needed to know the specific legal definition of parental abandonment. I had a sinking feeling that Olivia, in her desperation and arrogance, might try to call my bluff. She might try to dump the children on my doorstep and run to the airport, assuming I would never turn them away. I needed to be ready. I typed out my inquiry, asking what my legal obligations were if parents left their children with a person who had explicitly refused guardianship. I hit send, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. I was preparing for a war I never wanted, but one I refused to lose. As the departure date for Ethan and Olivia crept closer, the silence between our households hardened into a sheet of ice. Olivia stopped bringing the children over for their usual weekend visits. It was a tactical move, a crude attempt to punish me by withholding the only thing she knew I truly valued. She was using Liam and Grace as emotional leverage, gambling that my longing to see them would break my resolve. I did not break. Instead, I initiated a video call with the children on Tuesday evening, when their faces popped up on my tablet screen. I swallowed the lump in my throat and put on my warmest smile. I did not mention the arguments. I did not mention the trip. I just wanted to see your faces. I told them gently. Remember, Grandma is always here. If you ever feel scared or if you just want to talk, you can call me anytime. The standoff broke on Thursday morning. I was in my garden, pruning the hydrangeas, when Olivia's white SUV screeched into my driveway. She did not call first. She simply arrived. She stepped out of the car, looking frazzled but determined. She pulled 2 small suitcases from the trunk, followed by her own massive tote bag. Liam and Grace climbed out of the back seat, looking confused, just dropping by. Olivia called out, her voice shrill and overly bright. I am on my way to the travel agency to sort out some tickets, and since I was in the neighborhood. She walked briskly toward the porch, ushering the children ahead of her like a shepherd herding sheep into a pen. She was trying to create a fait accompli. She thought if she physically placed the children in my living room, I would be unable to turn them away. Once inside the hallway, she nudged Liam forward. The poor boy looked at me, then back at his mother, clearly reciting a line he had been fed. "Grandma," Liam said, his voice small. "I am staying with you?" "Right," Olivia beamed, though her eyes were hard flint. "See, they miss you so much. We will just leave their bags here while I run my errand. And since their dad and I fly out soon, it makes sense for them to just settle in now." I looked at the suitcases. Then I looked at my grandchildren. My heart ached for them, but my head remained clear. I slowly knelt down until I was eye level with Liam and Grace. I ignored Olivia completely. "I love you both very much," I said, holding their small hands. "But I cannot keep you here today. Your mommy and daddy are planning to leave the country. If they do that, without signing the proper legal papers to say I am your guardian, it is not safe for you. I cannot protect you if I do not have the legal right to do so." I stood up and faced Olivia. Her fake smile vanished instantly. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. Are you threatening to call Child Protective Services on your own family? You would actually do that to your grandchildren. I will always do what is best for them," I replied calmly, even if that makes the adults in the room angry. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had the number already queued up. I pressed the call button and hit the speaker icon. "Mrs. Summers," I said when the line connected. "I have a question. I am here with my daughter-in-law. If parents leave the country for 3 weeks and leave their minor children with a relative who has explicitly refused guardianship and has no legal authority to make medical or emergency decisions, who is legally liable?" The voice of my family lawyer filled the hallway, crisp and authoritative. That would be considered parental abandonment. Margaret. The parents are the only ones liable for investigation. The relative who is forced to take the children has every right, and arguably the duty, to contact the authorities to ensure the children are placed in state custody until the parents return to face charges. The colour drained from Olivia's face. She looked at the phone, then at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The reality of the law had finally pierced her bubble of entitlement. She realized I was not playing a game of chicken. I was playing by the rules of the state. She snatched the suitcase's handles, her knuckles white. "Get in the car!" She snapped at the children, her voice trembling with rage. She turned to me, her eyes venomous. "Fine, you win this round. But you will regret this. You will regret what you just lost." She dragged the children back to the SUV, threw the bags in the trunk, and reversed out of my driveway with a screech of tires. I stood on the porch, watching the dust settle. I have not lost anything, I thought as the silence returned to my street. The only thing I lost today was the burden of being used. 2 days after the confrontation in my hallway, the notification arrived. It appeared as a high-priority flag from the fraud department of my private bank. Someone had attempted to access the sensitive ledgers of the Ellison Family Trust. They had presented a document that claimed to grant them full power of attorney over the assets. The bank officer noted that the signature looked digitally manipulated, essentially a scan of my handwriting pasted onto a new PDF. I downloaded the attachment. My eyes narrowed as I read the name of the applicant, Olivia Hart Ellison. The stated purpose for the access request was listed as proof of liquidity for international commercial acquisition, specifically a boutique hotel in Italy. I picked up the phone immediately. "Denise?" I said the moment she answered. "We have a problem. Or rather, I have a smoking gun. Clear your afternoon." By 1 o'clock, I was back in Denise's office, joined by Mrs. Summers, my family attorney. I placed the printed email and the forged document on the glass table. Denise studied the paperwork, her face tightening with professional disgust. "This is clumsy," Denise murmured, tracing the pixelated edge of my signature. "But it is bold. She is trying to use the family trust as collateral to secure a loan. She needs to show proof of funds to someone in Europe." "Dig deeper," I said. "Olivia does not have the business acumen to run a hotel. Who is she really meeting over there?" Denise made a few calls to her contacts in credit reporting and private investigation. Within an hour, the printer in the corner of the office began to whir. What emerged was not a portfolio of a savvy investor, but the autopsy of a financial disaster. Olivia was drowning. She had over $80,000 in credit card debt spread across 5 different high-interest accounts. The luxury lifestyle she broadcasted to her followers, the designer bags, the spa weekends, the organic catering was entirely funded by plastic. 2 of her cards were already in collections. "And here is the twist," Denise said, pulling a final sheet from the stack. "This hotel deal in Italy. It is not a solo venture. She is listed as a minority partner. The primary investor is a man named Matteo Rossi, a former boyfriend from her study abroad days." I sat back in the leather chair, the pieces clicking into place. The Euro trip was not just a vacation, nor was it a simple real estate scout for Ethan's benefit. It was an exit strategy. Olivia was looking to buy her way into a new life and a new business partnership, likely rekindling an old flame, using my money as the buy-in. She intended to leverage the Ellison assets, secure the deal, and leave Ethan holding the bag when the debt collectors finally came knocking. She thinks she is entitled to it, I said, my voice quiet. She thinks because she married my son. My money is already hers to spend. We checked the prenuptial agreement, Mrs. Summers added, adjusting her glasses. Ethan is protected regarding his separate property. However, Olivia clearly believes that once you pass away, Ethan inherits everything. And since she dominates Ethan, she inherits everything. She is borrowing against a future she thinks is guaranteed. I looked at the pile of evidence, the forged signature, the debt records, the connection to the Italian ex-boyfriend. It was enough to bury her. But I did not just want to win a lawsuit. I wanted to save my son. Ethan needed to see this. He needed to see the forgery and the betrayal with his own eyes, or he would spend the rest of his life believing his mother was the villain who ruined his marriage. We are not going to the police just yet, I decided, standing up. We are going to have a meeting. Denise, call them. Tell Ethan and Olivia that I am ready to discuss a comprehensive resolution regarding the childcare and the future of the estate. Tell them a mediator will be present. You are setting a trap, Denise noted, a small smile playing on her lips. No, I corrected her, gathering the incriminating papers into my briefcase. I am scheduling a performance review, and I think it is time for a termination. I walked out of the office into the bright afternoon sun. My heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from the cold anticipation of the truth. Olivia wanted a drama. I was about to give her the season finale she deserved. The mediation room was suffocatingly beige, designed to neutralize emotion. But the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. I sat on one side of the oval table with Denise and Mr. Henderson, the neutral mediator. Ethan sat opposite me, looking confused and slightly hopeful. He clearly thought this meeting was merely a formality to smooth over the babysitting disagreement so we could return to our comfortable status quo. Next to him, Olivia sat with her arms crossed, her foot tapping a frantic rhythm against the carpet. She looked less like a daughter-in-law and more like a defendant waiting for a verdict she knew was coming. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat to begin, but I held up a hand. I will start, I said, my voice low and steady. I looked directly at my son, Ethan. I love my grandchildren more than breath itself. But I am done being treated as an unpaid employee in a life I financed. I respect you as my son, but I can no longer respect your silence. You have watched your wife treat me like a servant for years, and you said nothing because it was easier for you. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but Olivia cut him off, leaning forward aggressively. Oh, spare us the martyr act, Margaret, she snapped. This is not about respect. This is about control. You use your money to pull our strings. You are just angry because for once, we are doing something for ourselves. And you cannot stand not being the center of attention. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick black folder. I slid it across the polished table until it rested directly in front of Ethan. If we are speaking of control, I said calmly, then perhaps you should look at what is inside that folder. Ethan frowned, glancing at Olivia, who had suddenly gone very still. He opened the folder. The first document was the high-resolution scan of the forged power of attorney, followed by the bank's fraud report and the stack of credit card statements Denise had acquired. What is this? Ethan asked, squinting at the paper. Then his eyes widened. The color drained from his face as he read the name on the unauthorized access request. Olivia. Why is your name on a request to access the family trust? And is this Mum's signature? It looks weird. It is a digital forgery, I explained, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Your wife attempted to grant herself power of attorney over my assets to secure a loan for a hotel investment in Italy. She was using my money and your future inheritance as collateral for her own debt. That is a lie, Olivia shouted, though her voice wavered. It was the financial advisor. The agency told me they handled the paperwork. I just signed what they gave me. There is no agency. Olivia, I said, pointing to the credit card statements. Just like there is no investment portfolio. There is only $80,000 in high-interest consumer debt that you have been hiding from my son. Ethan flipped through the pages, his hands shaking violently. He looked at the lists of luxury purchases, designer shoes, spa treatments, 5-star dinners, all dating back months, all unpaid. You told me we were saving money, Ethan whispered, looking at his wife with horror. You told me the trip was an investment strategy. You were going to use Mom's money to pay this off. I did it for us, Olivia screamed, slamming her hand on the table. Because your mother sits on millions while we have to budget. She owes us, I owe you nothing, I said. And what hurts me, Olivia, is not the money. It is that you were willing to commit a felony against the woman who put a roof over your head. You see me as a walking wallet, and you... I looked at Ethan. You have been so afraid of her that you let her blind you. I turned to Denise. She handed me the new estate documents. This is the new reality, I announced. I have restructured my will. The majority of the estate has been transferred into a sealed trust for the education and healthcare of Liam and Grace. It is managed by an independent third party. You cannot touch the principal. You cannot borrow against it. It does not unlock until they are 25 years old. Olivia looked like she had been slapped. Furthermore, I continued, I am exercising my right as the landlord of the property at 42 Maple Drive. I am not renewing your lease. You have 6 months to find a new place to live. If you need a security deposit for a rental, I will gift it to you. But I will not co-sign a loan. I will not buy you a house. You can't do that, Olivia shrieked, standing up. Her composure was completely shattered. You are throwing us on the street. You are destroying this family. You are just a bitter, jealous old witch who hates that I am young and happy. Ethan put his head in his hands. He made a sound that was half sob, half groan. He finally saw the landscape of his life for what it was, a minefield laid by his wife, financed by his mother. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my jacket. The room was silent, except for Olivia's ragged breathing. A family is not built on exploitation. Olivia, I said, looking her in the eye, I am not destroying this family. I am destroying an illusion. I am doing this to save those 2 children and my son from a future shackled by debt and entitlement. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving the wreckage of their lies behind me. The departure date arrived under a cloud of desperate negotiation. After the disastrous mediation session, the grand 3-week European tour had collapsed. It was now a frantic 10-day trip, shortened because partners had pulled their funding and Olivia's credit limits had hit a wall. Yet, she refused to cancel. She clung to the idea of this trip like a drowning woman clutching a piece of driftwood, insisting that this was her last chance to secure the investment. Ethan looked like a ghost, trapped between his wounded pride and his blinding ambition. My suitcases were already standing by the front door. I held my ticket for the Caribbean cruise in my hand. But before I called the taxi, I asked Ethan to come over one last time. Alone. He stood in my living room, looking at the floor. I am not forbidding you from going. Ethan, I said, my voice firm, but quiet. But I will not watch your children while you run away with a woman who just forged my signature. If you get on that plane without securing a legal guardian for Liam and Grace, I will have no choice. I slid a document across the coffee table. It was a drafted notice from Mrs. Summers. If you leave them here without legal consent, I am obligated by law to contact Child Protective Services to place them in temporary care. I will not be an accomplice to abandonment. Ethan looked at the paper, his face pale. Mom. You wouldn't. I would, I said, because I love them enough to ensure they are safe, even if it means protecting them from their own parents. At that moment, the back door creaked open. Liam and Grace ran in from the garden, their shoes muddy. Grace was holding a piece of construction paper. Grandma Liam shouted. He shoved the drawing into my hands. It was a crayon sketch of a large boat on blue water. On the deck, there was a stick figure with grey hair. Far away, on the shore, 2 smaller stick figures were waving. Dad said you were going to watch us, Liam said, looking up at me with innocent eyes. But I think you should go play on the boat. Mom and Dad are always gone anyway. We are used to it. The room went silent. The words of a 7-year-old boy cut deeper than any lawyer's threat ever could. Ethan looked at his son, then at the drawing, and I saw something inside him finally shatter. The denial broke. That night, the walls of their house shook. I did not hear the words, but I knew the outcome. Olivia screamed, blaming me, blaming the world, blaming everyone but herself. But for the first time in his marriage, Ethan said no. He told her he was not going. He cancelled his ticket. The next morning at the airport, the scene was starkly different from the one Olivia had envisioned. She walked through the sliding doors alone, dragging her oversized suitcase. Her phone pressed to her ear as she argued with a bank representative. She looked stressed, diminished, and frantic. Ethan did not go with her. Instead, he drove the children and me to the terminal for my flight. We stood at the security checkpoint. The airport was bustling with noise, but it felt like just the 4 of us existed in a bubble of clarity. Ethan looked tired, but his eyes were clear. Mom. Ethan started, his voice cracking. He hugged me, holding on tight, like he was 5 years old again. I am going to start over. Not with your money, with my 2 hands. Please do not cut me out of your life. I pulled back and cupped his face. I never cut you out of my life. Ethan, I said softly, I only cut out the illusions. I turned and walked toward the security scanner. I placed my boarding pass on the reader. It let out a sharp beep. I walked through the metal detector and looked back through the glass partition one last time. Ethan was holding Liam and Grace's hands. All 3 of them were waving. I looked up at the departure screen. My destination read, Clearwater Bay. I smiled. For years, I had been the anchor holding them in place. Now, I was finally the one setting sail. The only act of revenge I had truly taken was forcing everyone, including myself, to finally grow up. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you guys are tuning in from today. So drop a comment down below and share your thoughts on how Margaret handled this situation. If you enjoyed this drama, please make sure to subscribe to the Grandma's Family Diary channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more people.